welcome back to Inside City Hall. Our next guest has worked beside Charles Rangel for over a decade as part of New York's congressional delegation. And joining us now from Washington is Brooklyn and Queens Congressman Anthony Weiner. Thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
So today was Congressman Rangel's ethics hearing. In a surprise move, he got up and left, citing his lack of legal representation. What are people on Capitol Hill saying about what happened today?
Well, this isn't a happy day. Anytime you have even one of these proceedings going on, it's not a happy day. And I think that, Mr. Rangel wanted to have his chance to have his moment in court, so to speak. And I think he's entitled to that. Now it's in the hands of the Ethics Committee. They generally do things pretty much down the line. This took a very long time, but I'm glad it's finally coming to an end.
What do you make, though, of his strategy? The Ethics Committee said that he had time, at least 2 years, to raise money for a legal fund. His lawyers are saying that they tried to work out a deal in which he would be able to perhaps afford them. What do you make of his strategy?
I don't know if it was strategy or just the practicality of not being able to afford legal counsel in a very expensive environment. I don't really have any insight in it. Frankly, the tactics are less important to me than he has an opportunity to clear his name. And if it turns out that he did the things that he's accused of, that I think that the House is going to look very unkindly upon it.
Do you think by leaving today, by saying he didn't have the legal representation, does that hurt his chances in clearing his name?
It probably does.
You think it does? But in terms of whether they decide if he did the things that he is accused of doing, are you at this point prepared to vote one way or the other?
No, I want to see what the Ethics Committee does first.
So you have
they've actually seen a lot more of the evidence than I or you have.
So you need to look at that evidence and what their findings are before you can actually decide which way you'll vote.
Yeah, I want to see what the Ethics Committee's recommendations are before I prejudge it. I haven't had a chance to see it, but there's no doubt about it that it's not a happy moment. I'm hopeful that that this thing gets quickly behind us for the sake of Congressman Rangel, for his constituents, and for Congress.
So will you vote whichever way they decide?
I'm not saying that. I want to take a look at what they report.
All right, let's talk about something else that's going on in Washington. That's the lame duck session. There's a Droga bill, the bill for 9/11 healthcare workers. There's going to be a rally. Tomorrow, Mayor Bloomberg is going to lobby lawmakers. How concerned are you in this lame duck session that the bill could die in the Senate?
I'm very concerned. I mean, look, let's take a look at the math of this. We finally passed it after 9 years in the House of Representatives. Only 17 Republicans voted in favor of it. It's very easy to kill something in the United States Senate. You really only need 1 or 2 senators to decide they're against something. And so it's going to take a really big lift in the Senate. It shouldn't. I mean, if you just look on the merits of this, you just look on what this is about. This is about providing health care to people who are dying every day from 9/11 related illnesses. There's no reason this should not pass with 100 members of the Senate voting for it. But there have been a lot of other things in this session that have died because even a single senator, sometimes anonymously, says they're against it. The one thing I would say is that if they're going to try to stop it, we should make them stand up and say who they are. It's regrettable that so much politics has gotten involved in this. I think that this should be one issue that should be completely bipartisan.
So this is Republicans, you think, just not wanting to support the Democratic agenda?
It's hard to say. It's a combination of different things. I mean, I think that there's no doubt about it that the further away we get chronologically from September 11th, the more my colleagues seem to forget that was an attack on our whole country, not just on our city. I think there are a lot of members of the United States Congress who simply don't want to give any victory at all to the President Obama or to the Democratic Congress. That's why they vote no so consistently. But hopefully all of those things can be set aside, and Mayor Bloomberg can have some influence on trying to get people like Mitch McConnell to say, you know what? It's a bill that's completely paid for. It's a finite number of people. The number of people aren't growing. Frankly, it's shrinking. And hopefully we can get this done before the end of the year. And
you mentioned Mayor Bloomberg. How much influence do you think he could have?
Well, look, he's a very persuasive guy. I think that it takes more than persuasion to bring some of these Republicans around. I think he's going to learn that. But it certainly helps. The one thing that Mayor Bloomberg has not been shy about is on the national stage using his expertise and celebrity to try to bring around some recalcitrant members. And I think as a Republican, it probably would help influence some members. But remember, we need a couple of Republicans. I think we have every Democrat. Senator Gillibrand and Schumer have done a terrific job on this, so we just need a couple. Hopefully he can find a couple to peel away.
But this month and next month, are these 2 months really the last opportunity that you have to get this passed? Because if it doesn't pass this year, do you think there's any hope of it passing next year?
Well, look, there's some hope, but this is really kind of a now or never situation because the Republicans in the House of Representatives, only 17 of them voted in favor of the bill the first time it came up. They didn't seem particularly happy that it was even being called up for a vote and did everything they could to stop it from coming up. So will they change their stripes when they're in charge? Maybe. I hope so. Remember, this is not partisanship. The people that we're helping, we don't know what their party registration is. No one asked them when they went down to the pile. No one asked them when they volunteered to help out. So I hope it's not the end of the line. I think it is kind of between November and December. These are our magic months to try to get this done. Remember, it took us 9 years to get this far. And
this is the first time that all of you are back in Washington since the election. What is the mood among New York Democrats?
Well, it ain't good. It ain't good. It's kind of like coming out of your house after a nuclear Armageddon, dusting yourself off and saying, boy, I'm glad I'm alive, and then looking around and seeing so much destruction. This was a dramatic time for the New York delegation. Several of our members lost. A couple of members are hanging on recounts. We lost influence undoubtedly going into the new year. But more important than individual members is what this is going to mean. Look, we had an urban president and an urban-dominated Congress that lost power after doing things to try to deal with the challenges that we faced that ultimately were very beneficial to places like the city I represent. So the mood ain't great, let me tell you.
And do you want Nancy Pelosi, to become minority leader?
Well, she's the only one running, and
is she a good choice, though, for Democrats, given that you say you're dusting yourselves off from this Armageddon?
Well, one thing I can say for certain is that she should not be the person blamed for this. Look, she was doing the bidding of the congressional delegation and of the Democrats in Congress. We wanted to pass health care reform. We wanted to rescue the financial sector. We wanted to turn around the economy. If you look at from the moment she became Speaker to today, the economy is dramatically better, believe it or not. I mean, more jobs have been created in the first 2 years in the private sector under Obama than in 8 years of President Bush. So it's hard to blame her for this. Is there a sentiment around Washington that some people say, let's sweep out all the leadership? Yes, but I don't know if that's rational thought or just people having a visceral reaction to the election.
Well, what do you think Democrats need to do to emerge from what you call an Armageddon?
Well, I think we have to do a couple of things. One, I think we have to kind of reestablish the fight in our party. I think we realize that not everything is going to be a compromise. Bipartisanship is a means, not an end. We should try to be bipartisan when it gets things done, but it's pretty clear from watching how the Republicans have functioned, they want nothing to do with getting anything accomplished. I also think we have to stand up for the things that are our democratic values. Social Security, Medicare, they're both under attack right now by the incoming Republican Congress. We have to stand up for those things. I think that we have lost too many members in the fighting wing of the Democratic Party. And as I've said before, I think, sometimes we come into knife fights carrying library books when we should be ready to really fight things out for the things we believe in.
And the fact that Charles Schumer today, it was announced, is going to get a promotion of sorts within the Democratic leadership of the Senate, is that going to help Democrats at least construct their message and sell their message?
100%. Chuck Schumer is that rare combination of someone who's a legislative genius but also understands how important it is to sell and to explain to the American people what we're doing. I think that's exactly what's been lacking both in the White House and, frankly, in Congress. And I think it's an excellent choice. If of all of the bad news, having Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand get reelected and emerging in greater and greater prominence is very good news for New York.
All right, we only have time for one or two more questions. I wanted to ask you something about closer to home, and that is Kathy Black, the selection to become the new schools chancellor in New York City. There's been a lot of controversy, mainly because she has no educational background, no connection to the city's schools. What do you make of the selection?
Well, first things first. I mean, the Department of Education has to decide whether to give her that waiver, and that's something that I think that they pretty much call it as they see them and want to do the right thing for city schools. Look, my belief is, and I'm someone who went to public schools my whole life. My mother was a school teacher for 32 years. At the end of the day, the moving parts in the school system, a safe school environment with technology that works, qualified teachers that are well paid, principals that are empowered to make the decisions that they need, and teacher and parents that are involved. These are the things that whoever the chancellor is, we have to improve at just about every level. It is the mayor's right to make this pick, and he's accountable for the success or failure. So I certainly want the new chancellor to be a success.
Do you think she should get the waiver?
I'm going to leave that to the experts, the Department of Education. I think it is important that the mayor have someone that he trusts. But he's got to remember, part of school accountability and part of getting mayoral control is the buck stops on his desk. So he's going to be measured. He's going to be measured by the success of this appointment.
But do you share the mayor's sentiment that all you really need is a good manager at the top of the Department of Education? It doesn't matter if that person comes from an educational background?
I disagree with him on the first part of that premise, that I think you need more than a manager. You need someone who understands the school system fairly well. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone who has been a teacher or been an educator, but I believe it sure does help.
All right, Congressman Anthony Weiner, we are out of time. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks.
All right, it's time for a break, but coming up, will today's ethics hearings have any effect on how lawmakers act in the future? We'll have inside analysis from the 4 members of our Consultants Corner. Stay with us.